Welcome, world. This is Wilson coming at you, and welcome to the movement. We are the Shepherds of Men.
Yes, we are.
I am sitting here with Cam and JP.
Hey.
And O is the producer on the backgrounds, making it all the magic happen. So today's conversation, we're going to talk about challenging conversations.
Oh!
Yeah. So I know everybody out there has probably have dealt or experienced some kind of challenging conversations, and we want to kind of talk through some of this. And how, when you face these challenging conversations, where do they come from? Most cases, I believe, and you guys can probably say yes or no or whatever you want to think about it. But I think that if you're doing things in life, you're going to have challenging conversations because you're basically stretching the status quo of people around you. And some people just don't like it. It rubs them wrong. Especially the ones that are haters,
Haters gonna hate.
Mm-hmm. And I was hating on the last episode, but it was my own fault.
Hated on.
It was all my own fault, so it's all good. But so I want to talk a little bit about that. And if you're not having challenging conversations, then I'd probably just think that you're probably not really pursuing much in life. Honestly, you're not really doing much. You may be or you're just at a position in life because you've already went through all of it. And you're not really having to deal with all that now because you're at a different, pinnacle in life because you have a lot of fruit on your tree and people trust you and care for your opinion. So that's great. Kudos to you. But there are people out there that are still challenging other people with these conversations. So what I want to know from the Shepherds is like, what would you deem a challenging conversation for you currently? And then what was it like to have a challenging conversation when you were developing yourself?
Well, when you said something about this topic, you had talked about a couple ideas you had about topics to discuss on this episode, and you mentioned challenging conversations, and it's something that's been kind of on the forefront of my mind recently because of some challenging conversations that I needed to have and some that my wife needed to have with people and things like that. And it's just, they're important, man. They really are. I mean, I think so much is held back, and I can definitely testify to the fact that I've been guilty of not having them in the past. And I said this on a few episodes back about not having them with my wife. That was the part that I was like, I'd hold back on the challenging conversation with my wife because I just didn't want to deal with the consequences. But everything outside of that, I've always been happy to have them, and it's necessary. Now, my opinion is that you don't need to approach those challenging conversations as an asshole. Like, you should be respectful. You should, the tone should be right and those kinds of things. I think just because they're challenging doesn't mean they shouldn't be productive.
Right.
Honestly, it should be the opposite of that. It should be a very productive conversation because the fact that it is so challenging means that if you have it, it will probably be productive if you're respectful, But I had a situation just through my JOB recently that I was very eager to have a challenging conversation and I held back and, because of some different layers of that I needed to just kind of press pause on. And the other person I was like, I'm going to talk to him about this. He's like, I know you will. I know you will. But I'm asking you to just wait a couple of weeks. And so out of respect, I will. But I don't, there was a time where it was like, those were tougher to have, but I think as you develop as a person, you really and it's like anything else. Once you've done it a few times and you realize, like, okay, it's like ripping a Band-Aid off. Like, once you rip, it's like, oh, it sucked for a second, but we're good now. Or once you get to the gym, it's like, oh, I didn't want to get there, but now that I'm here, I'm really glad I'm here, and I want to be here for an hour. Or once you start running, it's like, I don't know what it is about me, but the first it takes me about a mile to get into it,
mm-hmm.
which is too long. It needs to be faster. But after that mile, dude, I feel like I could go forever, And so the same thing with the challenging conversations is like you've got to initiate, you've got to act, you got to do something. Can't overthink it. You can't, and I'm answering more than you asked, but
that's good.
You can't play around with it in your head. It's going to make it more challenging.
Yeah.
But once you do, I mean, there's just something about it that after you've done that a few times, you realize, okay, let's say there's something we've talked about this transparently before on here. Let's say there's some beef between me and JP or something we just don't see eye to eye on or whatever. We're brothers. Okay. There's going to be times in our life that we're going to not see eye to eye, whether it's about Shepherds or whether it's about our personal lives or whatever it may be, or our other business ventures we've got coming up. There's going to be times where it's like, it's not like we just don't agree on something. The worst thing I could do is not bring it up and just let it fester. It's
Right.
the absolute worst thing I could do. The best thing I could do is go, out of respect, this is how I feel about this, and then have some dialogue that allows each other to see each other's viewpoint, and then develop something from there, whatever the conclusion is from there. But especially for people that you love and respect, I think you have to have the challenging conversation. Otherwise, you're really holding back that relationship, and it's going to make it worse down the line. I mean, if JP and I, or me and you, or me and O, didn't have challenging conversations, we wouldn't be as tight as we are.
Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah. So speaking of challenging conversations, you stole my notes, Dick. So
most people don't know me by my nickname.
So
it's Richard, but whatever.
What I wrote down was rip off a Band-Aid. Like that's my methodology to having challenging conversations. And that comes from my own personal love language when it comes to challenging conversations. Because the worst thing in the world is if somebody has to have a challenging conversation with me and they beat around the bush and stuff, I'd almost look at them and go, dude, just tell me what the fuck you need to tell me. I would prefer that it's already an awkward situation. Let's just get into it. Like, let's just dive in. I think to a certain extent, you do need to understand who you're talking to, but I still think that you should give somebody the respect of a direct conversation, because this is not a chummy kind of, hey, we want to be friends. Now, if I'm interpreting what you mean by challenging conversations correctly.
Well, there's many different types of challenging conversations. We'll cover some, but go ahead.
So to me, it's an intent to come to a resolution, right?
Yeah.
In some form or fashion. So when I think of challenging conversations, I think of times where I've had to fire guys, and stuff like that. And when I do, man, to be honest with you, I never called him into my office and I was like, hey, how's your family? How's things going? Like, what's the problem? And so if I'm at that point where I'm having that conversation with you,
have you ever seen Moneyball?
We're done.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great example. Great example.
Yeah.
Don't call the guys in here and talk to them about their family. Call them in here and tell them you traded them.
Yep.
Like, that's the first thing you should say to them. Hey, man, come into my office. Yeah. What's up, man? Do you need something? Yeah, we're trading you to the Cleveland Indians.
It must be what he really says, because that's what the team I was thinking too was a Cleveland Indians.
Was it really?
It really was.
Is that what you're thinking?
It must be, because
I don't know what he said. I don't know what he says, but so
that's a challenging conversation. You're getting traded to Cleveland.
Yeah. Right. And that's a good example, though, because that's the way that I look at challenging conversations in the most part. And I mean, it's not a matter of like being a dick about it. It's just like, this is a fact of the matter. This is how it is. It's kind of black and white at that point. It's not like what do you think about this, and how do we, whatever. And I think of things like that from a mentorship perspective too. I've had individuals ask me since we've launched Shepherds of Men and stuff to hold them accountable for stuff and everything. And then there's been those challenging conversations where it's been like, dude, this is what you said you were going to do. You didn't fucking do it. So you need to eat crow right now and take it, own it, and stuff like that, and move on. It's a challenging conversation because it's, you want to be like, dude, it's cool, man. Don't worry about it and stuff, because I want them to understand it's not cool. Don't go back on your word. You said you were going to do something. You didn't do it. Like, you're going to own it, and, for me, I think when it comes to a challenging conversation, it's got to be direct, straightforward, rip the Band-Aid out. You ain't got to be a dick about it, but the facts are the facts, right? So you can't avoid them. Kind of like Cameron was saying, like, you can't dodge difficult conversations, because people that do end up creating more difficult conversations. And then on top of that, they create very confused individuals that they have to have those difficult conversations with.
Yeah. I didn't know. You looked like you had something else to say.
Yeah. I mean, I do. I don't know if this is on track with where you want to go next, but as JP was talking there, I had some notifications come up, and I apologize for looking at them, but it was, in this world we live in now, there's a lot of challenging conversations that tend to come up. And I think maybe not an epiphany I'm having right now, but a realization I'm having right now is one of the reasons that there's so much crazy shit happening. And one of my talking points so much recently with conversations is, why is nothing actually happening? Like,
right.
If we know this is so wrong, and we know this is so wrong, we know so-and-so did this that was wrong, why is nothing actually happening? Like, why is nobody getting in trouble for it? Like, what? And now I'm almost feeling like because somebody's afraid to bring it up. I mean, there's some people bringing it up,
right?
But is it being brought up to the level it needs to be? Like, are we as a society saying this ain't right? Or have we really weakened ourselves to a level that we're like, it's just easier to ignore it. I don't know. Anyways, that was just on my mind as I saw something that Zuckerberg other time.
Well, that's some good stuff. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because I actually was recently featured on another podcast called 3PL Live, 3PL Live by Jeremy Thone. And it should be available soon. But he mentioned a part where he was dealing with people, and he didn't say it in these words, but I took it as the like larger than life type of folks. People that you're almost intimidated by to go ask questions or to make you may not want to go ask these questions because you might think that you're a fool or you're stupid or you're asking wrong questions. And the other thing that he was talking about is more of like, how do you convince them to be on your side when you're trying to talk to them about an idea or get their approval? Because, you're dealing with other people. You always want your parents' approval or something of that sort. Some people are rebellious and they're just like, screw you, I'm going to do whatever I want. But in those situations, how do you deal with those larger than life folks if you have one? And how, if you want their approval, what do you do to kind of finesse the conversation, if you will?
I think you gotta look at what they want. Ultimately, when you look at somebody, especially if you're talking about somebody that's another level, and I assume that just based off the context of what you were just saying, you're talking about an individual who's maybe farther along in life than you, or whatever it may be, and you're trying to win them over or whatever it may be. Everybody has a desire in life. Everybody has a goal or tendency, especially when you start talking about that level. The cool thing about people that are probably at a higher level than you or farther along in life are probably more structured than you are, which makes them more predictable. And also makes them slightly easier to relate to, if that makes sense. So say I'm trying to talk to a VP or something like that. What I'm going to do in that challenging conversation is I'm going to find out what that VP's goals are. And where people miss it, I feel like, is they do not put their self. What I would prefer to do in a conversation, say Cam's a VP of a company that I work for, and I'm trying to have a conversation with him about something that I'm either trying to persuade him with or whatever it may be. I'm not having the conversation from where I'm sitting. I'm having the conversation from where Cam is sitting. I'm sitting in Cameron's seat and I'm saying, I'm the VP of this company. What the fuck do I want to hear? And not just what do I want to hear, but what are the deliverables? Like what can you possibly provide to me that would make me give you the nod? Because ultimately you have to speak their language. Mm-hmm. So when you have those kind of difficult conversations, it's not an intimidating thing, but you have to be able to think a couple levels above where you're at. That's why it's always important. And I believe this wholeheartedly. If you are in any kind of management position or any kind of hiring position, you need to hire somebody that's capable of a couple levels above where they're at. They may not have the experience yet, but if they're capable of a couple levels above, they can at least think at that level. So if they can think at that level, they can convince at that level. If they can convince at that level, they can be effective in what they're doing.
Well, if they can't think at that level, they're never going to get to that. Right. I mean, they're never going to grow, right? I mean, that's ultimately what you're saying is kind of off topic, but that's a great point, as far as what you're looking for. The other thing you mentioned as far as the outside of the management standpoint or the hiring or whatever, or the VP you're talking to, I'm just thinking about like you're having a challenging conversation with your wife. Mm-hmm. It's not when I say this, I don't want to be misconstrued. It's not about manipulation, but I need to have that conversation trying as closely as I can to think like she thinks.
Put some high heels on.
I mean, I don't necessarily have to be in that conversation to do that, but no, but truthfully, like I have to, and I think that goes with any conversation. You need to at least attempt to look from the other person's perspective, which we've lost a lot in society, and that makes the conversation more challenging but less productive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Best way
help me understand.
It is. It really is. Yeah.
Asking discovery questions. finding out why,
Mhm.
what makes them tick. And that was one thing that he was talking about in the podcast. He was saying, do you come prepared for the sales presentation for somebody who's intimidating, is like a big fish or whatever? And I'm like, well, you don't want to come in like what you were talking about and go and spill out your beans and go crazy. And you want to relate.
I've never spilled out my
well,
beans
no.
anywhere.
You're saying like you don't do that. You say less and you get more
for sure.
out of the sale or conversation.
Well, any conversation is going to be more productive if you learn how to listen.
Correct.
The other thing I want to go back to, which we've hit on a lot, is I am not a fan of that. How do you have a conversation with this person that's this place versus how do you have a conversation with the janitor? It's the same fucking conversation.
Yes.
Right?
Same
there's,
confidence.
There's no more value in one than the other.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever have a challenge with that, I'm going to go back to this again. You will hear me mention this. If you have a challenge with, I'm going to have a conversation with so-and-so that's in this position that has this title and yada, 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 yada. Just remember, at some point in the last 24 hours, they dropped trowel just like you do and sat on a toilet half naked and shat. And and they had to wipe their own butt. They're just a human. They are just a human. Like, you need to remove that crap and stop thinking you're less valuable. And your conversations will be less challenging.
And that's the root. That's the root of it right there. If you're confident with talking to a janitor about something that you want done, but when you go talk to somebody that has status, VP, CEO, whatever it is, and you're nervous or tore up about that, it's because you don't see the internal value that you have. You base your value off your status.
And that may stem from you don't understand your own value, like you just said. Like that may be the problem.
Right.
Is not so much that you see the value of those other people differently, you just don't understand your own value.
Right.
True.
It's good stuff. I like that. So what's helped you guys the most in dealing with challenging conversations as you
thinking about people's shit and everything?
Well, yeah, as simple as that. And if that's what it was, I mean, I don't know.
No,
but
that's for certain types of conversations, yes. But
yeah,
continue your question.
Well, that's what it is. I mean, what in getting to where you're at today, when you started, if conversations were challenging, were they ever? Yeah,
I've never had a challenging conversation in my life. all mine are pretty smooth and streamlined.
It's certainly when you've gained confidence, they are less challenging, or you just understand how to approach them. Even though they are as challenging, you understand how to approach them. I think for me, the most challenging conversations I have in my life right now are probably with my wife. They really are, because that's the only person on earth. Like, you can't mess me up. None of y'all can mess me up. There's nobody on this planet that can mess me up other than my wife.
Yeah.
If things aren't good between me and my wife, then it's on my mind.
Right.
Like
any man
like
should.
Any real man that's married, like, it's on your mind.
And if you're not, you might need to check some things.
Yeah, it's for sure. I mean, if that's not taking a very high priority in your mind about the relationship you have with your wife, then that's a different topic. But it's one that should be handled.
Mm-hmm.
But because that's that hierarchy thing. I
Right.
mean, that should be a towards the top. If for me, right under my relationship with my Heavenly Father, it's the next one.
Right.
Mm-mm.
So, did you say mm-mm? Who's in between?
Your country.
Oh, well, I'm talking about personal relationships.
Oh,
yeah.
God, country.
No, God, country, no, for sure. God, country, but I'm talking
limits.
about like a person, like a one-on-one relationship.
Yeah, no, I got you. I'm just giving you shit.
No, but that's true though. God, country, family. I'll take my shirt off if you want to see
it. I think it's funny that you guys keep talking about that. Like, is it really that important to have that kind of pillar, that kind of hierarchy?
Oh, absolutely.
100%.
It is?
Mm-hmm.
Just curious.
Trying to challenge us.
I don't know. It's just, I feel like we've said that over and over and over, and I just hope that the listeners start to equate that to, holy shit, maybe that just wasn't a cool phrase.
Well, here's another challenging conversation for those of you that are believers, and if you're not and you want to become one, we can talk about that. But
absolutely,
how about a challenging conversation with your Heavenly Father? That's a challenging conversation, right? If you're truly having it, and I know not everybody's Christians that are our listeners. That's great. There's no judgment whatsoever. But for me personally, a lot of times those challenging conversations are, in the quiet, in the dark, going, I screwed up, and I don't want to anymore, or I want to be better, or whatever, that is, and transparently, that probably, as a believer, probably should be more challenging than the one with my wife. I don't think it is for me right now, and I'm not proud of that necessarily. That's something I'm probably missing, but that's the only ones. As far as if somebody else has beef with me or whatever, dude, I want to have that conversation. Like
Right.
I want to.
Yeah.
I can't wait to have it. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I know that you move on. If you're eager to fix the problem or to talk about because if you don't, it festers.
Right.
Whatever it is festers. And if what I do for work, I interact with people all the time. It's constant interaction with people. I am fortunate to work with some very skilled people that are very good at what they do. They're very talented from a trade standpoint. There's some things that we probably do a little differently from a business running standpoint. And sometimes that can create some challenging conversations with our customer base. And I typically have to make us look good again.
Yeah.
So, but that's part of the role I play, and so be it, whatever, but that's important. But if I didn't have them, and this is not a self-serving comment, if somebody wasn't having those challenging conversations, our company wouldn't be around.
Right.
We're a small business. We're a family business. If somebody wasn't having those challenging conversations with customers, we would not continue to exist. Our reputation would be done.
Right.
So.
I think a challenging conversation for me would probably be if something that I don't really know a lot of information about, like especially if I'm caught blinded, not prepared.
That would be a seek to understand kind of
bourbon
conversation.
exchange.
I take a different, I take a different posture and position and stuff like that. Like for me, my confidence comes from curiosity in that situation.
Yeah.
I don't look at situations where I'm not extremely knowledgeable about and feel any kind of insecurity or inferiority because of that. Because generally, I take a very inquisitive side of things. When it comes to stuff like that. Like if we start talking about exterior stuff, on a house, I don't feel inferior to Cameron because of that. I'm more inquisitive. Like I'm like, oh, what is it? Just like he would do the same thing,
right?
With me, and I think you get into some of those situations. Now, sometimes culture as a man, if you can't disassemble an engine on a 454 engine for a Chevrolet, then you're not a man. So guys don't want to ask questions about that. So, oh yeah, I know how to totally disassemble an engine. Yeah, doesn't every man?
Yeah, you can take it apart, but can you put it back together?
That's the side of things where I think a lot of people get into those situations and they tend to shy away from them and they tend to default to the I knew about that.
Mm-hmm.
I knew about that. Whereas with true security, you would look at that and go, you know what? To be honest, I don't know, man.
Teach me.
Teach me.
I mean, and that's one of the biggest things as far as those challenging conversations, to be able to go, I don't know, because there's a lot of people that will not let the truth stand in the way of an answer.
Yep.
Which drives me fucking nuts. I would much rather you tell me you don't know than give me some bullshit answer. Well, especially if I'm asking your advice on something. Like, dude, if you don't know,
I really don't want you.
Say you don't know.
It's funny that you said that because we were talking on the podcast. What brought this all up too is that, he was talking about how do you deal with challenging conversations and do you prepare? What's your preparedness look like? And, in the context of what we were talking about is somebody who, CEO, somebody who some people would just kind of cower down. We don't have that mentality here, but at the same time, it's like, well, the first thing I'm not going to do is come in there and acting like I do know it all. First thing I'm going to do is stroke the dude's ego because he's built something or he's done something significant, or at least his title says so. And I know that that's in his mind. So you want to build some relatability there. Say, hey man, I really appreciate what you've done. Compliment him on his accolades, and then say, man, I'd love to pick your brain about something, and then fluff him up enough to where you go, hey, here's my idea. If this was something you were going to take on, how would you make it successful?
Approach.
So, in certain conversations, do you guys prepare for, I want to know, like, what would be considered a very tough conversation right now for you in your life? And then how would you prepare for that conversation? A little bit of transparency here.
Did you say for you and my wife or my life?
No, for your life. Like whatever in your life right now, because we're not talking about when you were building, when you are now. What are those tough conversations?
Number
to
one,
you now?
still building.
Right.
Always will be.
Well, of course.
Yeah. The conversations I think are probably the toughest, as I mentioned, are with my family, specifically my wife, just because they matter the most.
Mm-hmm.
The outcome of that matters more than anything else. So I don't know that there's a preparation for that. I'm not like, I don't sit down a game plan or whatever. I think it goes back to, for me, just trying to gain perspective, trying to see things from the other side, But
that's kind of a preparedness.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's
prepared your mind.
You prepare your mind going into it, like, okay, this is what I think and this is what I believe, but let me consider the other viewpoint. Let me consider where she may be coming from.
So you're not coming in that conversation combative. You're coming in that conversation discovery mode. Trying to.
You ever met my wife?
Yeah,
you want to have a productive conversation. You don't come in barrels blazing. It's just not gonna. And it'll be a fight, but it's not going to be a productive conversation.
You've learned. How long have you been married now?
7.5 years.
Yeah. So you're still learning.
Yep, still learning. And again, we'll continue to. But
absolutely.
And that's no de-edification of my wife. I mean, she could probably say the same thing. Like, there's challenging conversations with Cameron. Like, he's very bullheaded and he believes what he believes, and you're damn right I do. And
right.
It's hard to get me to change my thinking on a lot of things. I'm to a point to where I'm a little more like So I used to choose conversations that were challenging because they were fun. Like, I almost create challenging conversations just because I got a kick out of it. Now I'm kind of more like, I get a kick out of talking around something and making somebody think they're ahead on the conversation. I'm twisted, dude. Like I like somebody to think that they've won a challenging conversation and really just be in the background twiddling my thumbs going, well, that was fun. It's stupid. It's really stupid. But, I guess it's to a point where I'm not concerning myself with things that don't really matter.
Right.
Yeah. But when it comes down to, like, if it's preparation for, like, Josh was talking about hiring and firing, well, more so the firing. I don't do that anymore, but I used to. I used to be in management and I had to fire people, and it is challenging, but you have to. I think if you were any kind of manager, they probably know who you are as a person anyways, and you tell them straight up, like, you know what you did? We're done. And nothing personal. It is what it is.
You're going to the Indian.
You're going to the Indian.
I think Cameron kind of hit the nail on the head whenever he talked about, having conversations with your significant other, because I think God has a really twisted sense of humor. So when it comes to, the battle of the sexes, the whole thing, like we are very, very different in the way that we perceive things, see things, where our love languages are and stuff like that. And that's God's twisted humor to say, hey, you got a skill set that you need to develop. So instead of belaboring that point, I'll go to opposite of the hiring or the firing side of thing and the hiring thing. So you sit down in an interview, and generally you're going to interview with people that are level up from you. It's going to be difficult conversations. They're going to be asking you questions and probing and stuff like that. So ultimately, from a preparation standpoint, I need to know where I am and significant things that I've done in my life and be very clear about that. Some of that, creates clarity, obviously, but it also creates confidence in your mind to go, you know what? I actually did some good shit. Not only am I qualified for this, but you're blessed that I'm sitting here. Kind of mindset that you have to have. And it's not like a fake mindset. Like, if you walk in there and try to fake it, any good hiring manager is going to sense that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you have to actually believe in who you are and your abilities. But on the flip side of that, some of that preparation, and I'm not even going to lie about this, I'm a stalker when it comes to shit. Like, if I go interview for a job or something like that, with social media and all the shit that we have around us and access to people, dude, does he like dogs? Is he a cat person like Wilson?
Not a cat person.
He's a cat person, period.
What's his hobbies? What does he like? Stuff like that. Because ultimately, we've talked about this in previous podcasts. When you have tough conversations, especially when you're trying to get your way, or your point across or whatever. Now, if you're in a firing situation, understand the situation you're in. Rip the Band-Aid off.
Right.
If they're interviewing you to find out if they want to create a partnership or not, it's a likability thing, right? When you fire somebody, it's not likability. When they're trying to determine if they want to make a relationship, whether it's a sales relationship, hey, I'm going to purchase from you, or I want you on my team, or whatever it may be, it's a relationship thing. They don't really give a shit about you.
Right.
If you're confident and you have a skill set about you, they don't really give a shit about you. They want to know that you're interested in them. So ultimately, I'll go and I'll stalk people. I'll be like, hey man, I got a golden retriever and I just love dogs. No shit, I got a yellow lab, man. My lab will do this and that. I got to train for this, and there's triggers that you can find, and we've talked about this in the past. You let the guy, you got a 45-minute interview, and he talks for 30 minutes of it. You win.
Yeah.
Yep.
You win.
Sure.
He who says the least wins.
You may be about to go this direction, but something else I was thinking about as far as other types of challenging conversations are the ones that you have to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's a real challenging conversation where, let's say, for instance, maybe you have like a counselor or a pastor or something like that you go to for mentorship or counseling, and you really need to be honest. That's a challenging conversation when you have to go, you know what? I screwed up, or I am not doing this right, or I'm really weak in this area or whatever. Like that takes a lot of mental toughness to just go, if I truly want to be better as a man, I have to be vulnerable. I have to submit myself to somebody that has fruit on the tree and that I trust will guide me in a positive direction. And I have to literally lay it out on the table and go, this is everything. Right. And be willing to hear the response.
Right.
That's a challenging conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in those conversations before in the past where it was more on the financial side, whereas like I'm asking you to give me financial advice and now I need to really tell you where I am transparently, which is pretty easy because there's not much there.
This could be a short conversation.
Very short.
Now, if we're counting negative, it's a lot. No, and for dudes, and I say that jokingly, but for dudes, your ego can get in the way of that. Yep. And and I'll say just as a man, somebody that cares about you as a man, like don't let your ego get in the way of fixing your finances, because it will burn your ass for years if you do. And if you will just drop your ego and let somebody help you with your finances, it's okay. Promise you'll feel like more of a man if you have more money in your bank account. I know that sounds awful. I know it sounds materialistic. I know it does, but it's true. It's so true. And the second that you stop caring about who thinks you're broke and you actually ask people that are wealthy how to help you get that way, the better you're going to feel. And
believe it or not, when you have that conversation, you'll start to realize they actually do want to help me.
They actually want to help.
And if you don't believe Cameron, put about $5,000 in your pocket with a rubber band around it and tell me you don't walk different.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly right. Up straight every time.
That'll fix it. If you don't have $5,000, don't take out a loan.
That's not the same.
No, that's not the same.
Yeah.
That'll burn a hole in your pocket. Yeah. So going in for our listeners, I want to kind of just list out some things, practical things to do in these interviews or in these conversations that, you have to impress on the individual. My thing, these are things I wrote down, is that first and foremost, you got to stay calm in that conversation. Whether if it's a combative situation where the person's upset, the worst thing you can do in that conversation is to get heated too. You have to stay level-headed.
That's a big deal. You can't get emotional.
You can't. You have to disconnect. And if you see yourself going that direction, you need to figure out a way to deter the conversation or move it forward past that topic or whatever it is.
I would disagree that you have to disconnect. I would disagree with that. I think you have to connect, but you have to connect with a seek to understand kind of mindset.
Well, if you know what I mean by, like, if it's getting heated and it's not going anywhere productive.
You mean like walk away, like disconnect and walk away?
That's kind of what I'm referring to.
I can see that. Well, no, because if you get
revisited
heated
or something like that,
that
makes sense. Yeah, the disconnect part I wasn't tracking with either. But
sorry, that's what I meant by that. Yeah. Disengage.
Well, yeah, disengage. Yeah, because if you start yelling and get heated and stuff like that, that person is going to disconnect. Like they're mentally going to disconnect. So carry on. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that we were.
No, I like that you interrupted in that sense. It was good.
Typically, I don't like to interrupt,
most
but in that
cases, no.
sense,
Typically, I really hate it when you fucking
Thank you
talk.
for correcting
but
me.
in that situation, I'll let it fly.
Well, it makes sense up here sometimes when it comes out. You know, so thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Tough conversations.
Yeah, that wasn't very tough, but okay. If you don't know, don't lie about it. That's one thing.
JP mentioned that. Yeah.
Yep, you already mentioned
Absolutely.
it. Pause and think. Don't just blurt out something
Mm.
just because you want to be heard. So pause. Take a second, think through it. Try to diffuse the situation as quickly as possible if there is heated elements going on.
I think just to add on the pause,
Sure.
when you're having a conversation with somebody, and we've talked about rambling, pause for effect, because I think when you say something and you're having a tough conversation or whatever, you don't have to ramble, because I think that happens in a lot of situations. You talk about, when we talked about canning somebody or firing somebody. Don't sit there and ramble on and on and on and on and on and on. It's kind of like, Cam was saying, like, dude, listen, I love you as a person. You know what you did. We're going to have to part ways. Pause. If they want to say something, they can say something or whatever it may be, but you don't have to, I know we go way back and, we ate lunch last week and like we were cool.
If you still want to come around.
Yeah, you sent me that bottle of bourbon in the exchange.
That would be a tough conversation.
That would be a tough one.
Don't be Michael Scott on that conversation. Can we still be friends?
Hell no. Hey, we're getting married next week. I want you there. What? No.
I put this in here.
I got a side stitch.
Dude, Talladega Nights is the greatest.
It is good.
I want you there.
No.
So one other note that I put is if they challenge your leadership or character, defend yourself. Don't walk away from them just stepping all over you.
Win the conversation.
Win the conversation.
One of the things that I would add is you need to understand the situation that you're talking about. Are you trying to develop a relationship or are you trying to sever a relationship? Because they're two different conversations, and that's really a big line of delineation on how you need to handle that. One's a rip the Band-Aid, one is a relational kind of thing you want to relate to the person.
Yeah, win the conversation if it's worth winning. If it's not, man, just
let it go.
Move on.
Dude,
like I've had people bitch, scream, yell at me, and I have zero rebuttal. I literally just wait till they're done.
This doesn't make any sense.
Because there's nothing that's going to be achieved by me trying to mend that. So it's like, awesome. Now, if it's a relationship that's important and we're at that level where there's it's argumentative, then we might need to win the conversation / let's figure out how to get through this. But yeah, if it's just, something that's surface level and they're mad because they're whatever, I don't. It doesn't matter to me, and maybe that's whatever. I got enough friends.
Right.
So yeah, I think it has a lot to do with the relationship, and I think it has a lot to do with the depth of the conversation that you're having too. So like I do it with my boys all the time. Like the other day, Maverick was, I can't. It was just something stupid. Like it was like, why is it nighttime? Because the sun's on the other side of the earth. No, it's not. Okay.
Right, exactly. That's another one. Like, cool.
Yeah, and
we'll get back to that later.
Yeah, and then he'll look at me and go, you want to argue with me about that and stuff? And I'll just, okay. And his mom will argue with him about some of these things and stuff, and I'll just look at him and go, you know better. Okay.
Yeah.
And then he'll look at me like, you son of a bitch. Like that's like, you can see it. Like, you don't say that, but like
so you
in
did
his
win
face.
The conversation.
Yeah, like in his face, he's like, oh,
Got me.
Yeah.
Not gonna play your
Damn,
games.
I ain't gonna play your games. Not gonna play your game.
So any other tips or pointers in these situations? Yeah, the last thing that I put here was if you know it's going to cause a scene and you're in a spot where you shouldn't have this conversation, ask them to move to another location. Pull them away from the crowd or from where. I mean, out of two things. First is, if it's personal, man, you don't need to have that shared out with everybody. And if it's going to cause a scene, out of respect for that person, because maybe there might have been a lack of communication that's caused this confusion, and they're going to make themselves look stupid, and you're saving them from that stupidity.
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa.
You might not know the whole deal. But yeah, I think that's a big deal. Like, that you certainly shouldn't ever embarrass anyone or yourself. but if it truly is a challenging conversation that's worth having to be productive, then by all means it should be one-on-one. I mean, or if there's another party involved, they should be there too, that kind of thing. But there's no reason, like from a management standpoint, I know Josh knows this, man, you don't reprimand people in front of the whole crew. Like, pull them aside, talk to them one-on-one. Like, you're going to do nothing but lose respect if you call them out. And now, if they do something just really freaking stupid, you got to be like, hey, bro. You know, but if you got to have a really tough conversation past, hey, bro, come on, man, then that should probably be in your office or one-on-one or whatever. I guarantee you I'm not having a challenging conversation with my wife around a bunch of other people. That ain't going to be productive, you know. My kids maybe sometimes. If it's customers, typically not from a work standpoint. From a challenging conversation of me being vulnerable, that's probably going to be more one-on-one stuff. I don't really want to throw that out, you know, to begin with until I've come to terms with it and grown from it. Other things that may be challenging, they may be more challenging to the person that's receiving the conversation, but I might be totally okay with having them in public. Like, hey, motherfucker.
Right?
You!
Yeah.
And so, hey, we have talked about that, calling other men out from being stupid.
So I said, bitch. Oh, you caught it. No, so I think, you know, one of the big things, though, that and we didn't really cover this, but you need to carry yourself with a certain level of integrity and character so that when you do have to have those difficult conversations, the individual that you're talking to knows who they're talking to. Mm-hmm. And it makes those conversations much easier. A man that carries himself with integrity and character that has to have that difficult conversation, that person that's sitting on the other side of the table will go, shit, he's right. He's right. And he's right because not only does what he says make sense, but he also carries himself correctly, you know. So I think that kind of stuff is important too. And I mean, I don't know, like obviously, like we talked about, you don't want to embarrass yourself or embarrass, you know, anybody else that's around you whenever you're having conversations. You got to have enough maturity about you to pull somebody aside and be like, here, listen, come here. Like, we're going
situational awareness.
Yeah, we're gonna have a serious conversation.
Absolutely. All right. Well, in wrapping up, man, I know this has helped. You should probably re-listen to this multiple times. If you struggle with challenging conversations or conflict or anything of those things that we just kind of mentioned through here in this podcast, man, I encourage you just, you know, saddle up, you know, just freaking put your pants on and make it happen. And once you do it, just like what Cam said, after you do it multiple times, it's going to get easier. Ripping that Band-Aid off at the first time it's going to suck. You know, it sucks for everybody. Just be honest. But I hope that this has helped you. I hope you can actually find some of these things and these takeaways that you can actually apply in your life every single day. And I want you to do me a favor right now. We're at the end of the conversation here in this podcast. Is go to shepherdsof.men. If there's a social media platform that you have on your phone, go and follow us. Send us some information. Send us feedback. If you like what you're hearing, let us know so we know we're not just talking to mics. And also, if you have issues, problems, concerns, questions you're wanting to develop further as a man, first off, I would say go click the join button and send us your information so we can send you some information later on in life and stay better connected, because we are having some major things coming out in 2021 that you want to be a part of. And you can't get that on our social media. Go to online, join and subscribe to our information so that we can send you good information that you need to further develop yourself. And most importantly, go become.